Hi, welcome to Nine Tails Enigma. Today I thought I could share with you my experiences with astrology in general with other people. So most of you have figured out that I am an astrologer. I also offer consultations, but I also write a lot about astrology. I do astrology, I live astrology, and I breathe astrology. So I was introduced to it at a very young age, and to my mother. And in comparison to my mother, who just focuses on sun signs and compatibility, I expanded my knowledge. I went deeper. It helped me to understand people, but also I feel that astrology is so fascinating when it comes to not only understanding the psyche of other people and how they work, but it gets really interesting when you find out who you are as a person and how you function and which things maybe are more likely to trigger you. So I have to admit, here in the UK, so far people have been actually really nice to me about it. And this video is not about like to convert you to astrology, but it's just to give you a certain flavor how in other cultures astrology is maybe not being welcome or is misunderstood. And this video gives you an opportunity to maybe, hint out certain things which you can see and compare between different cultures. So yeah, so where I'm from, I grew up in Luxembourg and I had limited um, resources to astrology. There were not so many books I could find in the library. There were not so many magazines out there. Obviously, you have like the usual fashion magazines or women's magazines where they give you like predictions for the whole year, but astrology is more than that. So we live a little bit, or I grew up in a culture where, it is a bit more limited when it comes to astrology. Like, your sun sign, maybe when you're lucky, your moon sign and your rising sign, that's it. And when you say like, I'm a Leo, you're an Aquarius, oh yeah, you're detached and you're a party girl. And so the conversations you have with people are can be very bland. And if you tell them I'm into astrology, it's just, like what I've experienced, I went to a former high school reunion and I felt really awkward, not because I couldn't share and speak a lot of astrology, but maybe for other reasons. And that was like the perfect example where I felt like in Luxembourg, it's just putting into stereotypes. Whereas in the UK, obviously, for example, in academia, when I come with my astrology, they're going to probably roll their eyes. But usually in circles or social circles, or you tell people, oh, I'm a Cancer and I am a moon child, and they say, oh, I'm a Gemini. It really always leads usually to interesting discussions, and it really, I feel like conversations with people come super entertaining as well, and you learn more about how their relatives are, like how they function. And so that's actually, I would say, also the goal of astrology is to understand your relationships with yeah, with your friends, your family, and relationship with yourself, which is obviously the most important one you have in this lifetime. One story I have to share is that once I was on a plane, it was getting from Amsterdam back to Glasgow, and I had a sweet younger girl in her 20s, and I think he was an engineer. I think both of them were British, but they were born and grew up in South Africa, totally different generations. And they saw me, I was like working, I was doing like drawing a birth chart, and I think I was like working on a module. And they asked me and they found that really interesting, and I shared things with it, and I had a really great time. And what was striking was that person next to me, the gentleman, who I think is a Capricorn. He's an engineer. His mind is more like, towards the sciences. And he really, really listened to me carefully when I explained to him what was going on in this chart. And he really, really was like, for someone who comes from a different environment, maybe even things differently. He really, really, for some reason, I think I really convinced him with astrology and that it somehow works. And that girl, she was already hooked. So, I think she's like a Gen Z uh, girl. So usually they're all like into astrology, basically, especially in UK. And that taught me that like, wow, there are people out there, they don't know a lot about astrology, but they will still take your time to listen. And I wasn't there to convince him if he, but it was just like, he was not dismissive, and that was a positive experience. I also was once invited to an interview like a long time ago. I think it was in Luxembourg, and I started talking about astrology, and I still regretted it. My intelligence got evaluated. Because I put it down on my CV, and my intelligence, when they found out, I think I got a little bit defensive, and I shared them what astrology is, and I felt like, oh, okay, if you tell them you're into astrology, then your IQ is going to shrink in front of them. And I learned, you know what, you should not say these things. And it was an educator, who also didn't see the value of psychology. So he based astrology, psychology on like things, that don't matter in life. Why are you wasting your time? And that taught me, like, dude, you work with students. You should know, like, psychology is not only some kind of experiment. You do it in the lab. It is about well-being. It is about the well-being of your students. You should know. I'm not going to say which type of position that person had, but he had a very, very important, responsible position. But I'm just going to say this, that was a person who didn't see the value in psychology, and that's someone who works with students, with young people. Now, Mister, you work with young people, you should know that psychology is important, because if you don't have a clue in psychology and you work, because it is working with people, with humans, you should have some kind of idea, not only how brains works, but like that mental illnesses can emerge, the mental health, but that's a discussion for another time. But yeah, it taught me that like, we're very, very behind in this kind of way. So yeah. These were my experiences with astrology so far. I usually people are more and more, and obviously UK just has this, tradition of you just have better resources about accessing the occult, esoteric, and spirituality. If you go to the British Museum, and we have the internet, but can you trust what's everything in the internet? Not really. So you can see that many people don't know what astrology is, and it is also like not my um role to force them to like astrology, but it would help if people know what it actually is. And if they don't understand, or, it is very polarizing as well, because science will come in and will argue, yeah, it's rubbish. It's just, I mean, the calendar's already wrong. So what you don't know circulate in your mind doesn't make sense. But I will say this. People have been looking at the stars not because they're super pretty and shine bright. Like, I mean, if you look at the constellations, Do you think they just came out of nowhere? I don't think so. Do you think they were just like, I don't know, like someone used like some kind of laser machine and then shoot the little stars and trace them? I don't think so. But yeah, so this was my take on astrology, and that in other cultures we have different views, whereas in others we might maybe be more open about it. Maybe in other cultures, everyone is an astrologer or believes. And I think like where like my mother, she's Filipino, people are super superstitious there, and like when you tell them about astrology, obviously they're gonna open their mouth and share exactly, what they have. And but again, depending like which culture it is, you will have interesting debates and conversations with other people. Take care. Bye.